Hi guys, it's Becky, and today we are going to be doing a pendant using seed beads and some gemstones using the netting technique and attaching it to Silversilk flat mesh. And with netting, you can just attach it to some regular seed bead necklace, a chain, anything like that. So we're going to be using the Silversilk as a chain in this case. And the netting technique is fairly simple, but it takes a little bit of planning. So we'll go over the planning and materials and all of that. This is one that I made out of last month's Sam's Bead box. It has this dragon blood jasper and these seed beads and flat mesh that were curated to purchase alongside of it. And I think they go really, really well together. So what we're going to be using for this project is some of the Silversilk flat mesh that came with the most recent Sam's bead box, the Waltz of the Flowers bead box. And it's this really pretty, like, it's got a pinky tone to it, purple, and it goes perfectly with this Candy Jade pear pendant. So that's going to be part of the necklace. And then we're going to use the Candy Jade strand, basically all of the beads that came on the strand except for I think 2 of them. For closures, I used some of the delicas that came. It was the first month that they added some delicas as part of the extras, things that were curated to go along with it. So I used these and some of the 15 O's that were also curated to go along with it. And I made a toggle clasp. I'm not showing you how to make this toggle clasp because I followed a tutorial for this, but I will put the link to the tutorial that I followed into my description so that you can do that as well. And then also as part of our finishing, I've got some of these Silversilk crimp ends that go onto the flat mesh and are designed to work with that. So I'm going to set those aside. And then for the seed beads, I have these buttercream silver lined 11 O's. They're Miyuki, and they came in the February curated collections from Beads to Live By, and I thought that they were just a really gorgeous color that if you look at the rest of the Waltz of the Flowers box, you've got this beautiful like buttery with these sorts of colors, and I thought it was a great way to pull that same color into this necklace without having to add a whole bunch of other beads. Now, if you've used up your Candy Jade or you want to use different beads in a different colorway, I think that these beads mixed with these beads, these melons with the gold flakes on them, the fairy dust, I think they would be fantastic in a necklace with this baby blue flat mesh. I think that would look really great. And if you combine them, you'll have enough. If you don't combine them, you won't have enough for this project. Speaking of enough for this project, let's get back into our planning stage for this. So for the length of the flat mesh that I'm using, I want it to sit around my collarbone, but not be so tight that it is a choker length on me. Now this is actually perfect because it drapes really beautifully, but it's not choker length, you know? And so this is 17.5 inches. My closures take up a little bit less space than the closure that I've selected for this one. It's just a fold over cord end with a lobster clasp and jump ring. So those are my closures for this one. So this is 17.5 inches of flat mesh. So I'm going to just measure out 17 inches of flat mesh for this one, and I'll show you when we get started how to start it and how to figure out where to start, because that's going to be a big thing with this. Oh, before we finish. I'm going to be using for thread this gold dragon thread. I like the color. I like the drape that I get with it. You can also use like wildfire, like frost wildfire, or crystal colored fireline. Really any beading thread that is going to be able to handle a little bit of wear against the wire in these bumps, because we're going to be sewing into the bump to attach it to there. And it's not really sharp wire, but it may wear against it. So something that will withstand that, something that's thermally bonded would be great. Maybe not something that's just waxed thread. And then for needles, I'm going to be using a wide eye beading needle, because I am not great at threading regular beading needles. And it's just way easier for me to use this kind of beading needle. So that's what I'm going to be using. You can use a regular old beading needle, as long as it will fit through the holes on the flat mesh. Because after the flat mesh, it doesn't matter how big or small the beading needle is. So you're going to want 11 O's, you're going to want some gemstones, you're going to want some thread and a needle, and some way of doing closures with the flat mesh. As I said, I'm using these Silversilk findings that you can get from the Silversilk site. You can also use some fold over crimp ends like I used on this, the fold over cord ends. Those will work. There's also, let me see, Tiara Cast makes these crimp ends that I actually got these from Sam's Bead Shop, and they work really well with the flat mesh. You just feed the flat mesh into the end of this like so, and then squeeze down on it, and it crimps it. They work really well. So you don't have to have these, or if you've got some ribbon ends that are, I'd say 6mm should be the biggest, but if you find some 5mm ribbon ends, they're going to work even better with this. So that's what you're going to want for finishing off the end of your flat mesh. But let's get to measuring, okay? Because like I said, 17 inches of flat mesh will be about right for a necklace length for my neck. And you'd want to kind of hold it to your neck, make sure that there's just a little bit of drape below the bottom of your neck. If there's too much drape, the netting doesn't look great. It doesn't hang right. So you don't want too much space. You don't want like a really, really long necklace that hangs down past your cleavage. I'd say something that is going to have it above your décolletage. Now to clip this off, I'm just using some flush cutters. And sometimes you'll have like little bits of wire hanging out on the end. You can just pull that off with your fingernails and clean it up a little bit, and that's a little bit less neat than I would like it. That's just so you don't get little bits of wire coming off onto your neck while you're wearing it, although this part will be inside the closure when we have that. All right, so now I've got my flat mesh measured out. Let's plan the placement of these beads. All right, now how many rows you do of your netting, that is going to be determined by how many of these beads you have to go through. And you can use any beads as your connection point beads in netting. You could just use seed beads. That would be fine. You could use check glass beads. You could use some fire polish beads. I'm using these faceted gemstones. I used round gemstones in the previous project. But speaking of the previous project, I have 7 rows on this, which means, you know, each row that you go up, you have that many beads in your row. Like this is the first row, the one that I've got this pendant on. So that counts as one bead. And then you've got 2 beads in the second row and then 3 beads in the third row. So the number of beads that you use are going to be cumulative. So if you're using a pendant bead, you can count your rows and add that number to the previous rows. So you've got, if you had 3 rows, for instance, of netting, you'd have 6 beads total you'd need. When you add a row 4, you add 4 beads to that, which makes 10 beads. When you add a row 5, you add 5 beads to that, which makes 15 beads, and so on and so forth. So if you've got 15 beads, and that's row 5, and you add a 6th row, you're going to have 21 beads. And then if you subtract 1, like you do for this one, or for this one, then you're going to have 20 beads. So for 6 rows, I need 20 beads, and there are 22 of these beautiful candy jades. I used 27 beads for this one because I used 7 rows of these, and there were enough for that. If I could have added another row and done 8 rows of netting. And if I did that, you would just add 8 to 27 and you would get 35. So that's how many beads you need. Is the more rows you do, the more beads you're going to add. And it's each row, that number of beads, and then you add it to each of the previous rows. Again, it's cumulative when you're doing the math for that. So let's plan this out because I would like to have these planned. I could do it just randomly, but then I might get some color blocking where I have all purple on one side and all blue on the other side. And that's not what I want for this piece. I would like for them to be fairly evenly spaced as we go through this. So I'm going to have a purple bead at the bottom. So we're going to grab a couple of those blues, add a purple bead here, this bead on that side, this bead on that side. And these blues are different colors. You've got this really lovely, like, light blue that matches my fingernail polish. And then you've got this gorgeous turquoise color that makes me think of the ocean. And they all go really well together. So let's go ahead and get these purple, purple, purple. All right, so gonna probably have some purples on the ends and some of these in the middles. So you can see already I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 beads, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. So now we're going to add 15. And then this will be row 6 up here. I'm just going to have them be in this order. And I've got 2 beads left over. All right, now I'm going to thread my needle, and then I'm going to show you how to figure out where to start with this. I'm going to move this out of the way because I won't need it yet, but I'm going to leave these because this is the order that I want to add them in. And I'm also going to get out my seed beads. All right, I'm gonna just pull this off. I'm gonna pull off about a wingspan of thread. I can add more thread if I need to, but I would like to start with a decently healthy amount. And I'm using, did I already do this? I feel like I already did this. I'm using this gold colored dragon thread. You can use wildfire. You can use fireline. I wanted something that would work well with the color of these buttercream beads. See, they kind of look nice together. And that's why I chose this color of thread. Let's get this on here. I know there's a lot of opinions about whether to knot your thread when you begin a project or not. I'm going to knot it, but I'm going to knot it just at the first point where it connects to my Silversilk. So now that I've got this threaded, I'm going to figure out where to start. So I'm going to put both ends of my Silversilk together and find my halfway point. So with 6 rows, my connection points are going to be between each of these beads. So it means I'm going to have 7 connection points to the Silversilk. So with 7 connection points, I'm going to have one connection point that is right here in the middle of my my project. And so I'm going to find the direct middle of this. And this works if you have an even number of beads. So I've got my middle one right here. I am not going to sew through this, but I am going to count out from it. So this would be, if I was counting from this end out, this is the first connection, second connection, third connection, and fourth connection. So this would be where I put my 4th connection point. And I'm going to get to that in a minute after I go through the beginning of this. And I'm just zooming in so you can see the little bumps at the edges of this, because I'm going to be counting those. So I like 11 spaces between my bumps. You could do 12, you could do 10. It depends on how you want the spacing to look. I like the way 11 looks. So I'm going to count 11 spaces from this middle, this 4th connection point. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So just going to count again. 1, 2. Why is it having trouble focusing on me? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this bump here will be my 3rd connection point. So now I'm going to count 11 spaces from my 3rd connection point to find my 2nd connection point. Right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And that is my 2nd connection point. I'm going to count 11 more spaces. And that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right, so this bump here is going to be my 1st connection point. So I'm going to go ahead and go sew through that with my needle. I'm going through this bump right here with my needle. And I'm going to pull my thread. I'm going to leave myself a couple of inches of thread, like 3 or 4 inches. If you do not do knots, you're going to want to leave a much longer thread to weave down through your project. But I'm going to do knots, so I'm going to tie it right now, right here, to this project. 1 and Just go around this a couple of times. It's nice and secure. 2. Right there. All right, so for the first bit of this, I'm going to add, the start of this, I'm going to add 6 11-0 seed beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Push these down. And afterwards, I'm going to take this tail and I'm going to put it through this as well so that it's not just hanging out here on the edge. But for right now, I'm going to leave that. So I've got my 6 seed beads, and then I'm going to pick up. We're going to work our first row as we attach it. I'm going to pick up my gemstone, go through it. And then for this first row, we're going to be thinking of 6 and 5. So now I'm going to add 6 more seed beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to my thread. And then to sew into the next space on my flat mesh, I'm going to count 11 bumps over. So now that I've got that on there, I can count my bumps. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And that is my second connection point. I'm going to go ahead and sew through that. And that has connected the first part of our mesh, or our netting, to our flat mesh. Now after I've sewn through that, I'm going to sew back down through the last seed bead on there. So I've gone through this seed bead on both sides of the flat mesh. It's connected on this way. I'm going to add 5 seed beads to my needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And a gemstone. And then 6 seed beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe I should move these seed beads down here so they're within camera view. So now I've got 6 of those. And I'm going to count again on my flat mesh. So we're basically doing counting with Becky right now. I have 5 seed beads, the gemstone, and then 6 seed beads. And now I'm going to count 11 spaces on my flat mesh, or 11 bumps on my flat mesh from this. This is the bump I'm coming out of. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm just gonna stick this through here so I can know where I ended with 6. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I'm gonna just sew through this 11th bump here. Pull my thread so that my second gemstone is attached. And then I'm going to sew right back through that last seed bead, that 6th seed bead on the end. I'm going to try not to catch my thread on my Silversilk while I'm doing this. So now I have 2 gemstones attached for my first row of netting. And I'm going to keep doing this. 6 seed beads, a gemstone, and then 5, count 11 spaces, go through it, and then sew through this 6th seed bead on the end. And I'm going to keep doing that until I've added all 6 of my seed beads. So I will join you at the end, and then I will show you how to step down to the next row. Okay, so this is the last one. As we're going along, I'm going to pick up my 5 seed beads, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which when you count it along with the one that's currently got the string coming out of, that makes 6. And then I'm going to add my last seed bead, and then I'm going to add 6 seed beads. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm adding 6. And then I'm going to count over the same amount of spacing that I've been doing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And sew into my flat mesh. And this time, instead of just sewing through the first seed bead or the last seed bead that I had, I'm going to sew through all of my seed beads and the gemstone so that I'm coming out of the gemstone with my needle and thread. And this is how I'm going to step down from the first row. You might need to adjust these a little bit as you go. But that's my first row that it's there. I'm going to start my second row. And to start my second row, I'm going to pick up 5 seed beads. And then I'm going to sew 5 seed beads, and then I'm going to pick up my next gemstone. And then I'm going to add 5 more seed beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And sew into this gemstone over here, the next one in the row above. And this adds just a little swoop. This is my second row. Straighten that out a little bit. Of my next gemstone. Now I'm going to pick up 5 more seed beads. Another gemstone. And 5 more seed beads. And I'm going to sew into the next gemstone in the row above. I'm going to continue all the way until I get to the end of my row, and then I'm going to show you what to do once you get to the end of the row to go down to the next row below, because it's going to be a little bit different, not too different, but a little bit different from what we did in this row above. Okay, so here we are. This is our third row, and I'm going to sew into the last gemstone at the end of this row, right here. And then instead of sewing all the way up to the end and then back down, which I could do, there's nothing wrong with that, except your beads might get a little crowded with a lot of thread. I'm going to sew up into this first bead on the edge. And that's where I'm going to anchor my thread. And then I'm going to sew back through the gemstone. I'm going to skip that first bead, sew through all 5 of these, and then through this gemstone on my third row. And I'm ready to start my fourth row with my thread coming out of there. So I'm going to finish up these next 2 rows, my 4th row and my 5th row. And then when I get to the end of my 5th row, we're going to add our focal, and I'll show you how to do that at that point. Okay, so here we are. I have done 5 rows, and you can count the rows by alternating. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these are the 2 beads on my second to the last row. And here's where, if I was doing just beads without a focal, I would be doing 5 and then adding my bead and then 5 and then finishing up. But since I'm adding a bead, it's going to be a little bit different. Or since I'm adding a focal, it's going to be a little bit different. So for this, I'm going to pick up 14 beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And this is going to bridge the gap between these two, but give me a place from which to attach this central bead, this focal. So I'm going to go in through this bead and then out. Let me get a little closer. I'm going out through that one bead, just like when we switch directions to go down to the next row. I'm going out through the first bead next to my gemstone here, and then back through my gemstone, just so I can attach this to the other side. Let me pull this tight a little bit. If it gets caught, by the way, this is how you do it. Just pull that tight and then like that. So this is going to be my platform from which to hang my dangle. So I'm going to sew through the first 7 of these. 1, 2, 3. So through the first 7 of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's count that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to come out of that 7th bead. I'm going to pick up 3 seed beads. 1, 2, 3. And this is going to be kind of like a little bail for this. I'm going to go through my focal. I'm going to pick up 3 more seed beads. 1, 2, 3. And I am going to go back through the first 3 seed beads that I put on here. So I'm going through this twice. So I'm going to go up through these so that it's a little hooked on here a little bit better. Because I want my thread to be coming up this way between these beads. Pull this tight a little bit. I'm going to sew through these 3 seed beads here in the back. And this is different from the way I attached the other one. But this works just fine too. Through those 3, up through these 3. And now I'm going to go underneath this so that my thread is coming around between these beads. I'm going to sew through these 7 beads and into that gemstone next to it. I'm sure there's other ways of doing this. This is what I have figured out as a way to do this. I'm going to pull this tight. And now that I have this coming up out of this way, I'm going to sew all the way up the side through all of these beads. And I'm going to do another loop around here and tie off my thread. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All the way up through here, through all of these seed beads, through all of these gemstones, moving on up to the east side. And I may have gone a little bit too short on that. I should have had that come out a little earlier. I'm just going to use my pliers to pull this for a grip on my needle. I'm pulling this up, and I'm going up all the way to my last seed bead up here next to the flat mesh. And see, I already went through twice at the beginning side, if you recall. That's how I joined this. So this just lets me reinforce the attachment on this side one more time. So I'm going to go through the loop on the flat mesh that I went through before. And then I'm going to do like a half hitch knot. By making a loop and then going through it right here. I'm just going to do that one more time by making a loop and then going through it. Getting my tail out of the way too. There's a lot of stuff involved in this. So I've got a bit of a knot here. You can see that. And then I'm just going to go down. I just don't want to cut it right next to my knot. So I'm going to go down through this gemstone and out of it here, and that's where I'm going to cut my thread. So let me grab these scissors, and if I need to, I can burn down this end so it's not sticking up or out. See, it's a little sticky outy right there. I can get a thread burner and take care of that. All right, and now you remember how I had this thread sticking out of this side? I'm just going to do the same thing with this end of this thread. I'm going to grab my needle and thread this onto there. And go down through all of these seed beads. And this one gemstone. Then I'm going to cut my thread here. And I've got a lot of thread showing still. And I can burn down that excess. This is not cutting. Sometimes my snips don't do the job like I wish they would. All right, yeah, there's a lot of fuzz there to get past, but ta-da, the netting part of this is finished. Move these seed beads aside. Now, to completely finish it, I am going to add my ends to my flat mesh. And I am using, you can use just regular pliers. I'm going to grab these nylon-jaw pliers though, because they're a little bit nicer to the coating on this, or to the finish. And I've just got this in here like this. And then I'm going to take the end of my flat mesh. Actually, I want this to be a little bit flatter. So I'm gonna bend this over a little bit. I'm using some tweezer nose pliers for this. You can just use chain nose pliers or any pliers really to bend it over and flatten it. I'm just gonna flatten it on the sides too so that it's nice and neat. And now I'm going to stick it into my flat mesh cord end. And it's just like with ribbon ends. It has little teeth on it on the inside. So I'm going to stick my, because it's basically knitted wire ribbon. Whoop, it's popping right out. Just stick it in here and then squeeze these closed over my flat mesh. I'm going to sliding out a little bit. So I get all sides. Looks like I've got just a little bit poking out the edge there. There we go. And that is just a tiny bit of wire poking out of there. This is a metal file. I'm just going to file down that little piece of wire so it doesn't rub against my skin when I'm wearing it. All right, so that's one end. And let's get the other one. Let's bend it over to make it nice and neat. Okay. Get my cord end in here. Put it into my pliers. Like, that's the thing about the silicone coating, is sometimes it's a little slippery. So you gotta hold on to it. Did I call it silicone? Silicone. Nylon-jaw, that's what it is. It's not even silicone. What am I doing? All right. And sometimes it's easier with my other pliers. Come on, buddy. Okay, now it's closed on all sides. And I don't have anything poking out on the side. Ooh, it's almost done. And I'm going to attach my toggle closure with some jump rings. All right. Jump ring open. Now, when I made these toggles, I added a wire guardian to them. I just sewed the wire guardian on so that I would be able to attach them fairly easily. And I reinforced it a couple of times. It's not in the tutorial that I followed, though, but I'm still going to link the tutorial that I followed. Also, the tutorial is single color, and I did alternating colors on it. So let me get this last one on, and then we are done. All right. Whoop. Put that on that loop. Stay on the loop. There we go. Jump rings. It's always the fiddly bits. It's the fiddly bits that make the jewelry that we make, like, better, you know? The adding finishing touches and doing things like making sure that our jump rings are completely closed and having our toggle closures. So, beaded toggle closure. I love this, by the way. I love it. Flat mesh. And some seed beads and gemstones, and we have our netting on flat mesh. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will talk to you later. Bye.